Few genres love a good plot twist more than horror, because a surprise reveal can force the audience to think about the entire story in a wildly different way. Or maybe just deliver a bonkers payoff you won't be able to stop talking about. But not all twists are created equal, and it goes without saying that we've all seen our fair share of them that just didn't work. Like, at all. And in the recent history of the horror genre, the following are the big reveals that left the audience rolling their eyes, groaning, and perhaps even feeling like the movie ultimately wasted their time. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, and let's take a look at these recent horror movie twists everyone hated. Oh, and be aware, there will be spoilers ahead. Let's start with Christian is the secret villain, Megan 2.0. Because having Megan face off against a new, even more malicious android by the name of Amelia wasn't enough, Megan 2.0 also tossed a totally bland human villain into the mix. Near the end of the movie, we learn that Gemma's love interest and business partner Christian has been pulling the strings behind the scenes all along. Christian is initially introduced as a cybersecurity expert, but later reveals to Gemma that he was responsible for the creation of Amelia in an attempt to stoke anti-AI sentiment and then lobby the leaders of the G20 to legislate against it. The big problem here is that Christian is such a boring nothing burger of a character that it's impossible to care about his late film heel turn. And it certainly doesn't help that his villain scheme is so utterly uninteresting. Considering the movie is already wildly overlong at 2 hours, it just feels like added bloat the story really doesn't need. The unicorns rescue the Kintners, Death of a Unicorn. Death of a Unicorn is definitely a movie that just didn't know when to end, because after a unicorn kills the detestable villain Shepard, and the creatures use their magic to revive a dying Elliot, it feels like everything's been said. Despite the hilarious potential to abruptly end the movie when the cops arrive upon the bloody scene, it keeps going, as Elliot and his daughter Ridley are arrested and put in the back of a cop car to head to the police station. But at this moment, the unicorns re-emerge and ram the cop car off the road, the film suddenly ending with the implication that Elliot and Ridley managed to escape as a result. Of course, this entirely glosses over that the pair would already be logged into the system and are now criminals on the run, as well as the fact that the unicorn seemingly just murdered a cop who was totally right to arrest the pair. It's a final twist that doesn't land nearly as triumphantly as the filmmakers clearly thought it would. The clowns are the town's adults, Clown in a Cornfield. Though the marketing for Clown in a Cornfield was laudably restrained in refusing to reveal that there are in fact multiple murderous clowns terrorizing the local teens, the moment it's revealed midway through the film, it's incredibly easy to see where the rest of the story is going. To the surprise of few, we eventually learn that the killer clowns are all elders of the town, such as Mayor Hill and Sheriff Dunn, who feel the local teens are responsible for tarnishing the town's image. Much as social media has made intergenerational squabbling more prevalent than ever, those pesky Gen Z kids is pretty lame as motives go. And the whole evil town wants to preserve their way of life shtick was done so much better in Hot Fuzz almost 20 years ago. Considering that the movie as a whole is a disappointingly undercooked affair, it's fitting that the big twist is also something of a damp squib. Detective Shaw is a killer. Heart Eyes. Heart Eyes is a fun, genre-bending slasher rom-com with a fundamentally naff killer reveal. We eventually find out that the main killer is Detective Shaw, who has been carrying out the Heart Eyes killings with her husband, David, as part of their shared kink. But Shaw's guilt is painfully obvious from the moment that she has a mid-film confrontation with Heart Eyes at the police station. And just as the killer approaches her, we suddenly cut away. Shaw later shows up with a mere injured arm, and the film conveniently glosses over the fact that Heart Eyes didn't kill her for some reason. So it immediately becomes incredibly obvious that she's one of two killers. Horror filmmakers. If an event happens off-screen, savvy genre fans are going to immediately suspect that you're trying to pull something fishy. In fact, Shaw's complicity was so obvious that it almost seemed like she was going to be a red herring, which would have been decidedly more fun. It was all Moretti's plan, Opus. Of all the overdone twist endings, "It was part of my plan all along" is second only to "It was all a dream." And so A24's disappointing new horror opus climaxed with a dud of a final reveal, after journalist protagonist Ariel manages to escape the compound of musician cult leader Alfred Moretti with her life intact, all while the cult's members apparently commit mass suicide. But in an epilogue set 2 years later, Ariel has since written a book about her experience and visits Moretti in prison. Moretti swiftly reveals that the mass suicide was actually a hoax, and that the dead followers are all still living, having insinuated themselves into society to keep spreading his teachings. And then comes the big one. Moretti actually planned for Ariel to survive all along, knowing she'd write about her experiences and inadvertently help Moretti's teachings reach a wider audience. Beyond being insanely convoluted and implausible, as social commentary on the media's role in elevating the profile of society's worst people, it feels pretty clunky and heavy-handed. The Falconers are the killers, Fear Street Prom Queen. Fear Street Prom Queen was an underwhelming sequel that stumbled even further with its final reveal, that the masked killer is actually two people, Tiffany's father, Dan Falconer, and mother, Nancy, with Tiffany also being involved. For one, Dan just gave major off vibes from the first moment we met him, and having him kill prom queen candidates for the sake of his queen bee daughter Tiffany was about as obvious as motives get. And once we see a second killer, why wouldn't it be his wife? After all, why hire an actress of Catherine Waterston's repute to play a mere generic mother character? She's probably only doing a role like this if she's getting something fun and meaty to do. And what makes more sense than having her be one of the killers? Amusing though it was to see Waterston playing a mask-off psycho as written, it was also a painfully unimaginative twist. The kidnapper is the meter reader, Drop. Mileage certainly varies on Drop's main reveal that the secret person terrorizing protagonist Violet with sinister airdrop messages is a fellow diner, Richard, who intends to assassinate her date, Henry. But there's also a second reveal that the man whom Richard hired to take Violet's family hostage in the event she refused to comply is actually the meter reading guy we were introduced to at the start of the movie for maybe 5 seconds. When he unmasks himself at the end of the film, it's clearly supposed to be a "what?" moment for the audience. Yet most were just left confused, wondering who the hell this random guy was. It doesn't help that numerous other characters in the film look incredibly similar to this dude, and so the shock twist landed with a total thud, leaving millions to swiftly Google who was the masked man in Drop. For once, you can't really blame the audience for being inattentive here, as the meter reader is in the movie for seconds and makes no impression whatsoever. Casting a more distinctive looking actor and giving him something memorable to do before ducking out of the movie for 90 minutes probably would have helped. Demi and Mike are the killers, Hell of a Summer. Finn Wolfhard's directorial debut, Hell of a Summer, was a not bad throwback to classic camp set slasher movies like Friday the 13th. Though ultimately it came undone with the reveals of its two killers. Once again, this is a fatal case of the filmmaker failing to appreciate how observant horror fans tend to be. That is to say, if a character or two die off screen, viewers will immediately suspect them to be the killers. In this case, influencer Demi is murdered in her cabin, yet we never actually see the moment of impact. And though Jason later finds her body, she mysteriously vanishes when he returns there later. Considering we never actually saw her get killed, isn't it conceivable that she was merely feigning death in front of Jason and is, in fact, a killer? And the prospect of a second killer became immediately obvious when fellow counsellor Mike was grabbed from behind by the killer. Again, we never see him die, and he basically just vanishes out of the movie. Lo and behold, it's not remotely surprising then that Demi and Mike are indeed revealed to be the killers at the end. It was so predictable that, given the movie's obvious genre self-awareness, it seemed like we were being deliberately misled, but we weren't. You didn't really die. Final Destination Bloodlines. For the most part, Final Destination Bloodlines was a much better belated sequel than just about anyone expected. But its cruel final twist? A bit of a clanger. In the finale, protagonist Stephanie drowns before being revived by her brother Charlie. And as we know from Final Destination 2, being brought back from the dead is a surefire way to cheat death. But in the epilogue sequence, Stephanie learns the not remotely shocking truth from the father of Charlie's prom date. Because Charlie was able to revive Stephanie with CPR, she hadn't yet entered cardiac arrest and so didn't technically die in the clinical sense. And so moments later, a timber train derails nearby, and despite their efforts to escape, Stephanie and Charlie are then both pulped by the errant timber. Beyond the everyone dies ending of most Final Destination movies, feeling a little played out by the sixth one, it's a bit of a stretch that neither Stephanie nor Charlie realised the incredibly obvious fact that Stephanie's heart never stopped if she could be revived by CPR. And finally, Ray is one of the killers, I Know What You Did Last Summer. The legacy sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer, which made the bold but ultimately misguided decision to make one of the series' original lead characters one of the new killers. In the third act, we learn that the first revealed killer, Stevie Ward, has been working with none other than Ray Bronson. It's certainly a shocking and unexpected moment, albeit one that never really makes a whole lot of sense. Ray's motive, that he remains traumatized by the events of the original 1997 killings and resents that the town of Southport has attempted to forget about what happened, is laughably flimsy. Ultimately, the Ray depicted in this movie doesn't really feel consistent with the one fans know from the first two films. And while people absolutely change over the course of 30 years, this largely just felt like a desperate attempt at shock value that totally fell flat.